recall that one particular instance, okay, where you might have searched a certain person in online before even meeting them. It might be for a job candidate profile, for a job interview as well, even for a date, not now, right? So what is actually happening, this thing is, you might also form an impression about them. So what this impression can do is, you will be actually having an opinion about them. Why is this happening? Myself Sudarshan, and welcome to the world of personal branding, where your identity is often crafted long before you even get the chance to make yourself. Hi, I'm Sudarshan. It's nice knowing you. I'm more cooler in person. You even get to say this thing. You might also have this particular impression about you that can be positive, that can be negative as well. So, even before we say a word, even before we convey something, even before we express ourselves, we might come into this understanding that what exactly this personal branding is all about. It's about how we reciprocate, it's about how we express, it's about how we talk, it's about how we express ourselves into the people. Even before we say something else, they might have an impression about you. So what this impression exactly does, it actually creates a superficiality. So it depends on us how we can actually incorporate those things and thus being a reliable candidate for the same. So have you ever thought about this particular instance where it might feel like this particular personal branding is going overboard, where instead of using this as this personal branding as a tool for shaping your culture, this particular personal branding will be shaping you. That is very bad for a personal branding behavior. Now, if you just date back a few decades ago, you might feel like this particular personal branding is all about for celebrities, for business moguls who actually are influential in the market. But today, if you just consider for today market, everyone has their own personal brand. Why is that so? They have their own influential data to online profiles, where they might feel like if they feel that they're not online, if they are not encouraging to the online stuff, they're not visible to the society itself. And that is a very bad and more reciprocative way to talk about. So talking about a certain example of what exactly this personal branding is, what better way to talk about other person than Elon Musk. So what exactly Elon Musk is? The moment I say the name of Elon Musk, you might have an opinion about him. That may be positive and that can be negative as well. But the point here is, you have an opinion about him. And believe me or not, this particular opinion is the token for personal branding. So what exactly Elon Musk does is actually having his own brand. So this brand he builds is all about innovation. It's all about taking risks. It's about technological advancement as well. So if you think about what Elon Musk does exactly different from all other people for the personal branding is, he actually maintains this one word, that is transparency. And we as a people almost lack all this particular word when we build our own personal brand, because we are afraid of our own failures. But Elon Musk is doing this thing differently. He's not afraid to share his own failures. Take examples of a Tesla production resume. Take example of rocket failures that he has on SpaceX. He never fails to express them as an issue. Instead, he actually uses it as a leverage to make people connected with him. So what exactly is different and what he exactly does is, he actually makes people connected. And how he does that is just because of this one particular thing, that is, it is being real. It is not a narrative conveyance that it actually makes us believe that, okay, this is just a narrative word and we won't be able to reciprocate it whatsoever. The thing is, he is actually real. He actually creates unfiltered thoughts. He actually has his own opinions on different perspectives and he doesn't hide from that. He also showcases growth rather than just a perfection of us. And this is the only reason, and this is very powerful for a brand to build upon. So, talking about, so what exactly does this personal branding plays in a role of fitting into the dilemmas? So we talk about the dilemmas that I'm talking about. There are various consensus that will happen when we try to incorporate this personal branding as a whole. So that the first example we can talk, and to explain it a better way, I will take an example of this particular company. WeWork was not just a company, it was selling dreams. It was far more ambitious, it was innovative, it was technically so advanced that that particular company claimed in such a way that he did actually incorporated real world conciseness. But at its core, when you just take a good analysis and roles conveyances for the same thing, WeWork was just a real estate company leasing workspaces for the same thing. So I was actually, building up all these things, and you might have an opinion for the same thing. So before I stated this real estate leasing house versus, you might have an impression about it like, okay, this might be something big. But the brand that it built was something far more ambitious. So that raises an important fact that if you actually build on this particular brand, if it is very shiny, it is very loyal, it is very futuristic, if it is very pleasureful things, it is a perfect and idealistic thing. It is the most important point here is you have to build a foundation for that. If you don't build the foundation exactly right, it will crumble on its its own emotional weightage. And that is exactly what the first point of mind will be, and that is pressure to perfectness. So, believe me or not, perfection is a currency of social validation. So, what exactly does is we all strive to be perfect. We all quote ourselves in such a way that we are perfect individual. All the time we just look at ourselves, we just, in the society itself, we just project ourselves in such a way that I am the most perfect person that is there in the particular society. And in the mean process, we also forget the way that we are currently. Instead of showing ourselves, we just project a way that we just think that we'll be fitting into this particular society that will be accepted at. And that is very bad, and we have to don't exercise this fact currently. And if we do that, this will something that will lead us to crumbling, just like how we were did. So we start incorporating these people, the flawless image I'm talking about. If we just start incorporating that without believing the real values that we possess, ultimately we will also crumble the same way we were did. That brings me to the second part, that is lot of authenticity. The more important part of the personal branding is authentic. How idealistic, how individual, what value that you bring to the table as a personal branding that you possess. That is what authenticity is all about. If you take a good particular building of what personal branding can be, you might fall into the category of good authentic person. But believe me or not, while you actually incorporate this personal branding, you might actually take someone as an inspiration. But along the way, if you don't have a clear value, a clear definition of how you're going to progress, that will lead you to instead of inspiring from him, you rather start impersonating them. And in the meanwhile, you forget the own values that you started this personal brand all about. Instead of building on the values that you started about, you started impersonating the same values that you started, the person that you started inspiring upon. For example, if I'm taking learning as an example for inspiration, so I'm actually conducting a startup where this startup is focusing upon tech innovations and innovations as well. So in the meantime, my values got changed, my ideas got changed just because Elon Musk's perception of this got changed. So here, what exactly happening is we, in the meanwhile, lose this authenticity, which is very bad for a personal brand to actually happen. The next and third most important point is the risk of overpromising. I always tell to the people that I actually in conversation with, never overpromise things that you can't do. The thing is, you are labeled in such a way, and if you want to compromise on certain things, you have to understand, you have to express yourself in such a way that you don't have to overpromise them. You actually don't have to project that in such a way that you are experienced on this domain, but you are no business in being there. So if you do that, the expectations are viewed by rise, and that will ultimately that will actually happen. This will actually result in the fall of transparency that you are trying to build, and this will result in decreasing of trust. That is very crucial part of personal branding. And the next is mental toll of personal branding. Believe me or not, the 3 points that I talked about earlier will ultimately have a certain influential of what our mental toll can take. Believe me or not, if we actually talk about the personal branding, we all have our own social advantages and social issues that we take up of. So, like if we just go on, if we are trying to be pressured on this particular branding, if we are doing our own apathetic behavior, we'll be executing certain characteristics. So what will happen is we are pressurized in our mind in such a way that we'll be taking this as an issue and we'll be going forward with it. And in doing so, we might have certain imposter syndrome, we might have social dilemmas like falling in loss of individuality, which is the most important part, and also certain diseases like also certain diseases like you often fail to see when you often starting judging, like you are in fear of judgment. What if this person will say about me? What if that person will say something bad about me? That will reduce your performance and as well as what your branding is all about. So what is exactly the solution of all these things? The main solution lies in all of us. If we start constructing of what our original values are, we'll be acknowledging the personal brand as something as a tool where we can use it as to shape culture. So there are 4 different types of solutions that we can offer for this personal branding itself. But let me state with the first and foremost, that is be real, be authentic, and don't start yourself and don't just limit yourself in a digital presence. Rather explore your branding on the real life issues as well. Express yourself, control your emotions, express your emotions, be yourself, be a human rather than being a robot that you are accustomed to. Next, I always say this to different people that you always have to edit your personal branding. The thing is, it is okay to evolve, it is okay to pivot, it's also okay to carry different type of things that may happen once you start building your brand. The thing is, if you know how to incorporate those things while keeping the values intact, that is what the true essence of what personal branding is all about. The next is don't overpromise. As I stated earlier, risk of overpromising can be a very mental tolling and as well as something that will reduce your own branding itself. The next is you don't have to just showcases the victory itself. Rather showcases the growth that comes along with it. The thing is you can also celebrate your small wins on that regard. So the thing is you have to understand that people connect with real stories rather than the narratives that we present. So if you have to improvise this personal branding in a rather scale issues, what things can be done to improvise these things? The first thing to explain that thing, a very common example is again Elon Musk. I'll be stating here the same things, but the most important part by improvising this personal branding is be you. That is the value that you possess, the value that you strive to build upon during this personal branding is all about how you create and how you curate this thing. Instead of curating certain things, instead of building based on the transparency, instead of building certain superstitions, rather build your brand on what you are good at. So if I am good at speaking, if I am good at actually telling people that, okay, this is something that you can build upon. If I'm good at teaching, consulting, rather build on that. If you are ambitious, if you are innovative, build on that, live it. That is what you are all about. If you depend on the superficiality, that will actually demise you. And in the same way, if you just take an example of Elon Musk does the same thing. He thrives on innovation, he thrives on hard-working things. Instead of going for latest words like, the recent trendy words as well. Instead of doing that, incorporating that, he actually sticks to his own principle. And that is something that you can always rely upon, even though controversies happen due to Elon Musk's branding itself. That doesn't limit and that doesn't crumble his own branding itself. The next part is showcase your growth and not just perfection. Just as I said, growth is as much as good as perfection. People connect with real stories. They don't just support the people just because they always win. The thing is, they have to be humanized. People can connect with only you if you are humanizing yourself. If you don't humanize, if you claim yourself to be a superhero, that will make people to judge you. That will make people to have a controversial opinion about you. And that is very bad for professional branding, personal branding itself. So instead of focusing just on the overall massification or perfection of what you're trying to present here, rather focuses on growth, rather focusing on failures as well. And just as I explained about Elon Musk's professional experience as well, like his rocket failures, production issues on Tesla, he actually never hides this fact that he also often has flaws in himself. He also embraces that thing. And I want you guys and us as to incorporate these things. If Elon Musk can show his failures to millions, how about we show our failures to hundreds? The next and most crucial part is balance branding. Of course, the personal branding is all about how you're being real and how you communicate with the people. But that also depends upon what brand you are trying to build out. For example, if you are trying to build something, you also need to have a technical proficiency on that. If you just take an example of Elon Musk here, Elon Musk actually backs his own claims by being an innovative person, being more masterful in his particular domain that he is actually marketing to. If you don't focus on the technical perspective, his brand would have failed long time ago. Instead, he thrives on that. He actually builds on own principles and he starts exploring on the particular domain that is involved in. And that gives a brand more significant opinion than any other things. And actually, despite controversies, its brand still remains intact. So this all sounds like a fantasy world, right? So what if I say that this particular fantasy world is real? And it all starts with us trying to incorporate something that we are rather than projecting something that we don't want to be. So what if I say that this personal branding is not a mask but a mirror? So what people say about you when you are not in the room is what professional branding is all about. It also depends upon you whether you use this personal branding as a tool to shape your culture, what you want to see in this world, or just let personal branding choose you and shape you for what they want it to be. But your choice is yours, and thank you.